Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my proud privilege on behalf of the D.S. Borker Memorial Foundation to welcome Professor Ganesh Devy, Professor Gopalkrishna Gandhi, and Shri Hardayal Singh, and all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for the 23rd D.S. Borker Memorial Lecture. Thank you for joining us in these difficult pandemic times. Last year, one did not imagine that this year again the meeting would be on a webcast. For 22 years, we met on 24th of August at the Deshmukh Auditorium at India International Center in New Delhi for this lecture in memory of Dadaji. For this 23rd lecture, we all, with our entire families, and that includes my younger sister Girija with her family, who's joining us from Washington, D.C., should have been in New Delhi to welcome you. Instead, I'm speaking to you from a studio in a webcast. This is the new normal brought in by the pandemic. But there's a silver lining that I think we have a worldwide audience who can see us live on this webcast on YouTube. I now have the privileged opportunity to introduce Shri Hardayal Singh, fondly Hardy Uncle, to my younger sister Girija and me as one of Shekhar Uncle's closest friends and in fact of the entire family. He shall be introducing the 23rd D.S. Borker Memorial Lecture, the speaker, Professor Ganesh Devy, and the chair, Professor Gopalkrishna Gandhi. Shri Hardayal Singh joined the Indian Revenue Service in 1970 and served the Income Tax Department with integrity and distinction as the Chief Commissioner both in Mumbai and Delhi, and later as an Ombudsman in Mumbai. During a sabbatical from service, he did his MSc in Fiscal Studies from the University of Bath, UK, and trained at the Royal Institute of Public Administration in London. He also served as the Additional Secretary with the Central Vigilance Commission. Post-retirement, he was a visiting professor and then dean at the School of Inspired Leadership. He's presently a columnist and writes on economic issues and leading financial papers for the country. Over to you, Hardy Uncle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Girija. Oh, sorry, Haim. Thank you very much, Haim. May I, Professor Ganesh Devy, the keynote speaker of the day, Chair Shri Gopal Gandhi, and my dear friends, may I say how happy I am to introduce this year's D.S. Borker Memorial Lecture. My vision of India 2047 AD, the memorial series by this name was instituted in 1999. Today's lecture is 23rd in the series. A civil service initiative, this lecture is held annually on August 24th and is an important event in the intellectual calendar of the capital. The lecture series are in the memory of Shri D.S. Borker, an eminent civil servant and public sector administrator. Due to the restrictions necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic, a physical function could not be held last year. This year too, we are constrained to hold the lecture via a special webinar. Shri Borker was known as DSB or Nath to his friends. Born in Bombay on 17th August 1911, he had his early education in this city and went to England for his higher studies. After independence, Shri Borker joined as additional secretary to N.V. Gadgil, a member of Jawaharlal Nehru's first cabinet. He worked with great dedication and sincerity of purpose. In fact, in his memoirs, N.V. Gadgil records an important incident post-partition when Delhi was burning in the midst of communal riots. D.S. Borker writes, saved the life of Hussein Imam, ex-chairman, Council of States and member of the Constituent Assembly from Bihar, and also member of the Working Committee and the Central Parliamentary Board of the All India Muslim League. He was a close associate of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. D.S. Borker saved him from a violent mob, personally escorted him to Safdarjung Airport, and put him on a plane to Patna at grave risk to his own life. Such was D.S. Borker's commitment to the values he held dear. He emphasized the importance of sports in child development. In 1940, George Allen and Unwin, London, published his book, Physical Education for India. This book is kept in the rear section of the Bodleian Library, University of Cambridge, from where it was sourced by Haim, who just introduced me. In this book, Shri Borker fervently appealed for creating a fitter nation. Through this book and articles in leading newspapers, he also advocated the idea of play streets, by which certain streets during the specific hours of a day were to be closed down for vehicular traffic so as to enable children to play on thoroughfares. This experiment was tried with some success in certain cities in the UK. The Times of India applauded the scheme in its editorial of 7th May 1940. Shri Borker received the Ling Medal from the King of Sweden in 1939. Later, after independence, he worked in a number of public sector undertakings, notably Hindustan Steel, State Trading Corporation, and Engineers India. He was thus, by all accounts, a versatile man, and the Borker family, Suhas, his two daughters, Girija and Haim, his wife Sudha, and his erstwhile late brother Shekhar, can legitimately feel proud of his accomplishments. The idea behind the D.S. Borker Memorial Lecture Series is to strengthen our secular democratic values and traditions and encourage the process of free thinking with regard to the kind of India we want in 2047. This series is unique in that it has consistently showcased diverse and contrarian ideas as well as alternative visions and agendas across a remarkably broad spectrum of disciplines. Debate, ladies and gentlemen, is an intrinsic and invaluable part of democracy. Many countries claim that they respect diversity as a cardinal principle. However, when it comes to implementing this concept, most of them flounder. Shri Borker's two sons, Shekhar and Suhas, initiated this lecture series in 1999. Both of them have been close friends of mine from my school days. While delivering the 6th memorial lecture in 2004, K.R. Narayanan, former President of India, said, Shri Borker was a remarkable public servant, and very few public servants have such lectures instituted in their names in Delhi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, may I, with your permission, introduce the keynote speaker of the day. Professor Devy Professor Ganesh Devy does not really need an introduction at all. He is a thinker, cultural activist, and an institutional builder, best known for the People's Linguistic Survey of India and the Adivasi Academy, which he created. His first full-length book in English, After Amnesia, which was published in 1992, won him the Sahitya Akademi Award and is regarded as a classic in literary theory. Since then, he has written and edited close to 90 books in English, Marathi, and Gujarati. His genius and scholarship extends across literary criticism, anthropology, education, linguistics, and philosophy. Professor Devy held fellowships at Leeds University and Yale University and has been a Jawaharlal Nehru Fellow. In 1996, he gave up his academic career to initiate work with denotified and nomadic tribes and Adivasis. During the course of his work, he created the Bhasha Research and Publication Center at Baroda. Later, he initiated the largest ever survey of languages in history. Professor Devy, the audience are very keen to listen to your address. But before that, I have another very pleasant function, and that is to introduce Shri Gopalkrishna Gandhi. Gopalkrishna Gandhi does not, again, need any introduction. He is distinguished professor at Ashoka University and teaches political science, history, and Indian civilizations. He started his career in the Indian Administrative Service in the year 1968. Later, as he rose in his career, he was vice president. He was secretary to the vice president of India, and thereafter secretary to the President of India. He has been India's High Commissioner in South Africa and Sri Lanka, and our ambassador to Norway and Iceland. He has a number of books to his credit. One of the most notable ones is The Essential Writings of Mahatma Gandhi, which was published by the Oxford University Press in the year 2008. But behind all these formidable achievements, this vast array of stellar achievements, is for me a figure of a schoolboy. Gopal and I hope you don't mind my calling you Gopal, were in school at the same time. Ironically, the two Borker brothers, Suhas and Shekhar, were also with us, although a few years junior. Later, Haim and Girija also went to the same school. But as I remember Gopal, there is in my mind a figure of a schoolboy who was very forthright, honest, and idealistic. The integrity which Gopal imbibed in school in his formative years has remained with him throughout his life. Thank you, Gopal, for being today's chief guest. May I now request Professor Devi. Sir, the audience is very keen to listen to you. The floor is now yours.
Adivasi, thank you so much for these kind words of introduction. Thank you. It's an honor for me being introduced. Mr. Suhas Borker and the members of the Borker family, I would like to say to you that I feel very touched that the legacy of such wonderful thought, faith in democracy and secularism is being continued through this lecture series. And the absolute commitment the family has shown towards continuing this series, despite many difficulties that have come in the past, and of course this year and the last year, the COVID. I am very grateful to you that you thought of inviting me to speak to the right audience that attends this lecture series. Share of this evening, Gopalkrishna Gandhi. Ladies and gentlemen, the task given to me is to think about 2047 in the 21st year of the 21st century. It is true that 47 is still 26 years away from us, and changes, big and small, do take place in the country and outside the country, by the day, by the week, by the month. And it's not just because of those changes that I'm humbled, overwhelmed by the challenge of speaking about 2047, but for a completely different reason. And it is that when I was asked to speak about my ideas of what India will be, what the people of India will be, what the world will be in 2047, I was thinking of a time 100 years before our time, since 2047 is marked 8 to remember 1947. And therefore my mind went back to the year 1921. And I was trying to imagine how someone would speak about 1947 in 1921. So as I was looking at that situation, I realized that 1921 was the time when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar launched his Mooka Nayak, which became the foundation of all rights, human rights, and justice movements uh, for the last century. And it was in 1921 that Mahatma Gandhi went through a complete sartorial transformation, but it was not just the change of clothes, it was also his preparation for taking over the control, the reins of the Congress. Chilak had gone in 1920, the Lal Bal Pal era was over. It was the First World War was to be over and a new India was emerging. And it was at that juncture, probably in the first week of September, that Gandhi emerges as a new man with a new hope, a new way of resistance, a new method, understanding the adversary, and without demonizing the adversary, getting freedom. These visionaries were there in 1921. If we had asked them how 1947 would be, they would have difficulty in 1920, I'm sure. But today, if somebody asks me to imagine 2047 in 2020. For lack of that kind of vision, the task is really very difficult. And therefore, with that caveat, I'll make an attempt to present to you a common citizen's view from a very ordinary level of visionary ability about 2047. I have chosen to place my thoughts in, in a sequence beginning with the largest issue and then coming finally to myself. The largest issue today before us is the cosmos. Pardon me for bringing in such a large issue right at the outset. About 4 or 5 years back, a certain star was spotted in the sky, which was emitting light at a hugely irregular frequency. And based on the study of that light emission, a conclusion was given by scientists that there is possibly an intelligence which knows how to control the source of energy and maximize it. Now, why do I
Professor
mention this?
Devi, can you speak a little loudly, sir?
Yes, indeed. Yes. Why do I mention this rather absurd kind of observation in science? The reason is the world seems to be deeply divided in its view of the future. One view rests on the idea of development measured in terms of energy available to an individual in a society, in a nation. The other view is looking at the situation of the ecology, natural disasters, and the ecological emergency created by humans by pushing the environment beyond the tipping points. The first view uh, thinks that it is possible to create a Dyson shell, an artificial shell around the earth to capture all the energy that's coming from the sun and then using it. And if it were possible, already tenders are afloat in Canada to construct a Dyson shell around the earth. If it became possible, then it is imagined, it is, it is argued that humans will have life made so easy that it will be quite possible to have your breakfast in Delhi and then have your lunch on the Mars and come back for the evening dinner to India International Center or the Khan Market, whichever way you like to call it. That confidence, that blight, cheerfulness in thinking about development as purely technology driven, science driven, taking us to more and more, larger and larger, as a counterpoint. That counterpoint makes me look at the elephants that got killed in Karnataka. It seems 800 elephants have teamed together in Karnataka in a war against humans. The story is very interesting, but for want of time, I'll not get into that. Today, those elephants are implanted with sensors to ward off the human beings who might get attacked by them, a war between other species and humans. There is news that the tidal waves will be much higher in future, that the glaciers will be melting at a rate which is impossible for us to reverse, but will be very devastating for life of the species. We are caught in between these two visions of the future. One thinks of the possibility of turning humans into Homo Deus, some kind of godlike existence, immortal beings, deathless beings, and the other talks of the possibility, a very distinct possibility of us, the Homo sapiens, leaving the Earth as a charred planet, ending diversity of species, plant diversity, and every kind of diversity. I mentioned these two distinct ways of looking at the future because we're getting pulled apart between these two very forcefully, and probably in the next 2 or 3 decades, this dichotomy will become very stark for us, and we will have to make a choice, a conscious choice of going for an eco democracy or going for an energized, energy gifted universe. I do not know which way India will be going in 2047. I now turn from this larger issue to a relatively smaller but yet very large issue indeed, and that is the question of nation. One has heard a lot about the idea of nation and nationalism in recent years, and one has seen how citizens are being marked as anti-national, innocent people, politically naive people. Do ask this question: is it really a crime to love one's nation beyond one's love for oneself? And the answer obviously is of course not. But then the idea of nation itself is undergoing a very radical transformation in our time. And let me take you a little back in history. In the 19th century, when the notion of nationality, nation was emerging, in Europe, there were two clear strands of thought, broadly, two clear strands of thought. One, which I can ascribe to countries like Italy and Germany, had one way of looking at nation, the idea of nation. And the other was the idea of nation that came from Ireland and also from the United States. What was the basic difference between these two strands of thought? In one thought, the nation, the Pitrubhumi, was territory, it was people, it was a language, it was a religion, but necessarily one motherland or fatherland, one language or not too many languages, one religion or not too many faiths. It was a homogeneous and yet an idea that would disallow a large diversity. The Irish idea was not rooted in the question of land. Of course, religion came in the question of Irish freedom, but the idea of freedom was far more important in the US and Ireland. And we got ideas from Singh, we got ideas from Garibaldi, Mazzini, we got ideas from the American thinkers. Our idea of nation, our political theory in India is rooted in the idea of freedom. We became a nation not because we were one people, or spoke one language, or had one religion, because we all fought together for freedom. Recently, I was going through the list of shaheeds, martyrs, during the 1940s, 42 Quit India movement. In Maharashtra, I saw a list of 2,200. And when I was looking at this, is a list prepared by the Council for Historical Research. When I was going through the list, I noticed that individuals belonging to all castes, all religions, Parsis, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, they gave their life for this country. They were not fighting for their religions, not for their languages, not for a piece of land, but for the idea of freedom. In 2047, India will have to emerge out of these contrarian notions of nation. A nation which should have only one overarching philosophy or darshan, where all others are subtenues. A nation which has to have only one kind of history, where all other histories are submerged in the noise of that, in the rhetoric of that oneness. That's one. And then a nation which is based on the idea of freedom. Indians do regret the violence during the partition, but not all Indians regret that there is a Pakistan or there is a Bangladesh. In fact, India celebrated Bangladesh freedom, not just because it was a splinter off from Pakistan, but Indians believe in the idea of freedom. I'll now come from the idea of nation to the idea of state itself. Of course, you'll expect me to open this section of my comments by referring to the diminishing of democracy. Since it is a widely known phenomenon in our life, I shall say very little about it at this juncture. But let me turn to another idea which is in peril, and that is when I open the Constitution of India, the very first sentence tells me that we, the people of India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. So India becomes India because of the states, not because they got united the way United States got united. But India cannot be just India without being a union of states. And you'll have guessed that I'm referring to the question of federalism. If laws related to farmers can be passed by the state assemblies, according to the lists given in the constitution, the state list, the central list, the joint list, and if laws related to education can be passed by the state assemblies, and if the center insists on taking the first step, there's something wrong with the perception of the federal structure of this country. Many among this audience are bureaucrats and they know this subject far better than I do. But one aspect of federalism that I would like to present before you as a linguist. The Indian Constitution accepts 22 languages as scheduled languages. It could not accept more, though it should have. There are other languages which have a claim in getting included in the 8th schedule. Is any one of those put above the other languages in the 8th schedule? The answer is absolute no. But the way the South Indian languages are getting bulldozed because only one language has to be promoted, one modern language has to be promoted, and one ancient language has to be promoted. I think that bulldozing of languages does not defeat the spirit of federalism. India is excellent as a country, as people. When India has hundreds of languages, dozens of religions, and all states, according to their genius, their native traditions, have their personalities. In 2047, India has to re-emerge with no ambiguity at all as a federation, not a centralized nation, a centralized state. I think the Indian state needs to be guided by the people of this country because we created it. It needs to be guided by the intellectuals of the country because they know a lot about it. It needs to be guided by the media of this country, though it cannot because a lot of it is intimidated. But this question of India as federation will is and will remain central to the future of India throughout its future. I'll now turn to the next question. I mean, I started with the cosmos, came to nation, then to the state. Of course, I should have spoken about the loss of, diminishing of democracy, but a lot is being said. You already know about it, and therefore I will not spend time on that. I'll turn to the people of this country, we the people of India. A nation is in its primary form, the people, and not the land, not the law, neither the territory nor the state, the people. That is the nation in its primary form. And then, of course, those people develop a view of their past and an image of their future, a dream of their future, and that the perception of the past and the perception of the imagined future start slowly replacing the people and acquire the definition of nation for those people. In India, I do not have to say this, but practically every child in every school today has learned, sadly, alas, and if has not learned is expected to learn to hate Muslims. That's that pains one's heart, one's soul. The Citizenship Amendment Act was targeted at exclusion, not just Muslims, but also of smaller tribal communities in Bangladesh. There are 18 such communities in Bangladesh. They migrate to the northeast. As I speak, in the year 2021, I am reminded that exactly 150 years ago, Lord Mayo in Calcutta, Governor General's Council passed an act called the Criminal Tribes Act. This Criminal Tribes Act, in its successive forms, subsequent forms, up to 1923-24, brought nearly 200 communities under its legislation, the form, under its range. Those people are kept in reformatory settlements. Were they criminals? My answer is no. I have met practically each and every community of the denotified and nomadic tribes. The Banjaras, the Minas, the Kaikadis, the Wadas. The Wadas are stone crafting people. The Kaikadis are entertainers. The Banjaras were transporters. The Minas were coin makers. They were designers. But they were singled out because of the deep suspicion that the British had of anything nomadic, anything non-sedentary, anybody who would not pay taxes. 150 years ago, these people are kept in prisons. They were denotified during Jawaharlal Nehru's times, but the schedule of tribes, schedule of castes were already formulated, and the DNTs were left in a lurch to nowhere. The approximate population today is 11 to 12 crores. It's not a small number. Suffering for decades in the jail, the settlements created by the British, not having access to education, healthcare. I mean, you know all those parameters. The DNTs of the country are languishing. The tribals of the country are left without their pattas, despite having a legislation, a policy. In the case of DNTs, there is no legislation, no policy, no plan. In the case of the Adivasis, there is a plan, there's policy, there is legislation, and yet, because of the mindset or the lethargy of those who are asked to implement, the Adivasis are left to fend for themselves. And if they raise their voice, they're called Naxalites. And if you sympathize with them, you are called an urban Naxalite. How many mob lynchings have the scheduled caste in the country faced and will continue to face? The scheduled caste, the OBCs, the Adivasis, the DNTs, the coastal people, the religious minorities, the linguistic minorities, those who are economically at the lowest rank. This is the vast majority of Indian people today. And it is being treated with scorn, indifference, hatred, intimidation. If you are a victim and file and you approach the police, an FIR is filed against you because you belong to a certain religion or you're a minority, or this is not the India of our dream. What Ambedkar fought for and what Gandhiji fought for is not this India. And in 1947, we could say with great pride about the Jana or the Gana. But today, uh, we are in a rush to discard communities. I think the India of 2047 has to be unequivocally, absolutely secular, and India that respects the idea of equality and justice, because they are enshrined as the pillars of our democracy. I'll now turn to the question of individual, of the cosmos, nation, state, and the people. I hope when I say this, the angry sea horse god of the ancient Greek myth will not get angrier with me than it already is. And the name of that mythical creature is Pegasus. Artificial intelligence, artificial memory, huge propaganda factories have turned the life of individuals in this country into an unbearable existence. When I was in 1970s or 60s, I was reading Orwell's 1984. Today, when I read that book, it sounds like an uninteresting book because life itself has become more interesting than George Orwell's 1984. As individuals, we need dignity and freedom. I say this because independence in 1947 was a very big revolutionary date in India's history, entire history. After thousands of years of subjugation of women, subjugation of various castes, after thousands of years of branding them, stigmatizing them, oppressing them, suddenly we became free, and on 26th January 1950, this wonderful scripture that we have called the Constitution said to all of us, we are all equal citizens. And when we are all equal citizens, then every citizen has a fundamental right of privacy, dignity, and respect. My idea of 2047 is a time when humans learn that they're part of the cosmos and that the cosmos is not their property. A time when we in India learn that freedom is the land on which we stand, that is our nation. My idea of India is freedom is the land and the constitution is the sky. And the rainbow between the two, joining the two, is India. In 2047, let us try to build that rainbow once again. In 2047, let us tell in a single voice from all states, Northeastern or Kashmir or Kerala, that the center is there as an arrangement and not as the pivot, not as the foundation of India. In 2047, let all of us say, if possible, in as many languages as we can imagine, Vaishnava Janato Tene Kaiya Jo Pida Parai Chan. And let there be not even one mob lynching or thought of mob lynching. In 2047, let individuals say, we may be not as rich as other countries in the world. We may not have as much military might as other countries in the world. But we have one thing that we can feel duly proud of, and that is we respect every life, every person, every individual, because every Indian believes that we belong to India, we belong to the earth. Nobody thinks that the earth belongs to us and India belongs to us. And if there are any individuals, even a very few, who think that India belongs to them, it is time for us to ensure that they are not in any near horizon, or they are not in any near horizon in 2047. Thank you indeed for giving me patient hearing and not snatching the screen away from me. I mentioned Pegasus. Pegasus had a brother, but I'll tell that story to you another time. And that was another cause. Let me be a person who respects bulls and not horses. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Devy. May I now request our chair to address the audience.
After a scintillating concert by Pandit Kumar Gandharva, who would want to hear a retired music critic from a defunct newspaper to speak on musical theory? No one. I do not wish to dispel the magic created by Professor Ganesh Devy's lecture by imposing a mini lecture on all of you. I will start by thanking the D.S. Borker Foundation for giving me the opportunity to join this series and join my tribute to the person after whom the series is named, for all that he was and all that he has initiated, and those who remember him are continuing. And I will follow that up by saying that we have just heard in Professor Ganesh Devy's lecture the thoughts of a linguist and a philosopher and an anthropologist who has brought together all these disciplines plus a vision which can only come from a political scientist to tell us about what India in 2047 should be in a world and in a cosmos at that point of time. Professor Devy is a linguist, as I said, first and foremost a linguist. And when we celebrate him and when we honor him today, we honor the diversity of languages, the diversity of cultural traditions, and what is called social capital in India. But not in a statistical way alone, that there are so many languages and so many dialects. That is important. But that is not the most important thing about the diversity of India. In the world of India's diverse languages, there is one language which is threatened more than other languages. There are many languages that are under threat. But there is one language that is threatened more than other languages, and that is the language of independent thinking. That is a language which Professor Devy speaks. And he can speak it in the languages that he knows. But the core of that language is independence. Baba Sahib Ambedkar spoke that language. Gandhiji spoke that language. That is a language under threat. And what is independence? Independence is not just the language of protest. I don't have more than 12 minutes to speak, and I will want to finish before that. But I am reminded of a great Nobel laureate, Shirin Ebadi of Iran. Shirin Ebadi had been hailed by the West for her defiance of extreme intolerance in her country. And her defiance had made Shirin Ebadi a cult figure in the West, in the so-called free nations. And so when she was given the Nobel Peace Prize, and she came to receive it, she was expected to say at the function, in her receiving speech, in her acceptance speech, all that extremism and intolerance in Islam means. And she did not disappoint. She started by saying, these are not her exact words, but this is the spirit of what she said. She started by saying, I will not wear a veil because somebody commands me to wear it. And there was a huge applause. But then she said something else. She said, nor will I cease to wear a veil because somebody expects me to stop wearing a veil. I will do what I wish to do. What is important is choice. What is important is the freedom to be able to choose. That is independence. Today, some of us are required to convince others of their patriotism, of our patriotism. Should I have to convince anybody about my patriotism? My patriotism is in my blood. Similarly, I do not want to have to convince anybody about my dissent either. I do not want to have to persuade the right about my patriotism or the left about my dissent. I want the freedom to be able to choose, to be able to say what I want to say at the time of my choosing, if somebody is interested to hear. And if nobody is interested to hear, that's fine. I will say it to myself. Professor Devy mentioned the two opening words of our national anthem, Jana Gana. Jana means you and me, individuals. Gana means the collectivity. Gana. Like Ganapati comes from Gana. Ganesha comes from Gana, the collectivity of us. The third word, Jana Gana Mana, is what is so important. That is what Tagore has immortalized. It is not just individual. It is not just the population as a whole, but it is the mind of the people. Jana Gana Mana. The mind has to be free. And that is how there is other great work, where the mind is without fear. And that in Bangla sounds something else. In English, it's great, where the mind is without fear. Chitto Jatha Bhayo Shunyo in Bangla. Chitto Jatha Bhayo Shunyo, where there's no fear. Independence. That is what Mana, as cherished by the Gana and by the Jana, means. I round off now by saying that in the larger song, Janagana Mana, of which a major abridgment was necessary, because you can't have a long national anthem and you can't have a variety of emotions in a national anthem. You have to have a very crisp national anthem which gives us the substance of our ethos, and that is what was done. But in the larger song, there is a portion in which Rabindranath says, he talks of darkness, of Nibira Ghana, darkness impenetrable in Milton's phrase. And he talks of nightmares. And he talks of being unconscious. Murchita deshe, Murchita deshe. And then he says to Mother India, Rokha korile amke snehamai tumi mata. Protect us. O loving mother, protect us. Ghora timira ghana nibira nishibhe. Pidita murchita deshe. Dushokne atanke. Rokha korile amke snehamai tumi mata. But it cannot end on a grim note. Nor did Tagore end on a grim note. Even in this portion, which occurs only in the larger song, he says, looking at the northeast, many people have said correctly that in the description of the regions of India in our national anthem, the northeast does not figure, but in the larger song, it does figure. He ends that part of the song by saying, Ratri Prabhatila Udilo Robichuri, after the night, when the dawn occurs. Ratri Prabhatilo Udilo Robichuri, when the sun rises. Ratri Prabhatilo Udilo Robichuri. Purva Udayagiri Bhale. Purva Udayagiri Bhale. On the forehead of the northeast of India. May the northeast of India and the south of India, which Professor Devy so importantly referred to, are metaphors. They are not places. The northeast and the south. Like the north and the south in the sense of the global south. Like the left and the right are not places. They are directions. North and south, left and right are not destinations. They are not places. They are directions. Directions to which we must travel for the building of a just society, of a society that is independent, in which we do not have to please anyone out of fear, whether of the left or the right, but we have to be independent. This is what I believe a person like D.S. Borker was, which is what Ganesh Devy is. And I just want to say, with my hands folded, there is something about Maharashtra. There is something about the genius of Maharashtra, where Acharya Vinoba Bhave said, when somebody told him, हमें एक बनना है, he said, एक बनो, पर नेक भी बनो. एक बनो, नेक बनो.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Devy, our keynote speaker, and Shri Gopal Gandhi, our chair for the evening. Both of you, in your own inimitable ways, have spelt out very powerful visions, if I may say so, very inspiring visions of the destination and the direction in which we should be moving as a nation. I will not make the mistake of summarizing or paraphrasing whatever Professor Devy said, and later on what Gopalkrishna Gandhi, the comments which Gopalkrishna Gandhi made as the chair this evening. Suffice it for me to say that yes, some extremely powerful metaphors and themes were brought out this evening. Professor Devy talked about the tension between economic growth measured in a purely linear fashion in terms of goods and services which a nation produces. But he pointed out in his own way that the quality of those goods and services and how they are produced, whether environment is respected or not, is as important. And indeed, as Mahatma Gandhi pointed out decades ago, means are always as important, if not more important, than the ends. There is always this tension between technology, a society driven by technology, and eco-democracy. That means a democracy which aims at not only improving the standard of living of its people, but also it attaches equal importance to the environment. We had other themes relating to the rights of an individual, the rights of privacy. Professor Devy talked about George Orwell. I was at that time when he talked about 1984, and now how hackneyed it might look. I was also reminded of Animal Farm. He talked about a rainbow where our constitution and freedom blend together in a perfect rainbow. Gopal seized upon this theme and talked about the essence of our national anthem. He talked about Rabindranath Tagore and what it means when the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Altogether, this has been an inspiring evening. It's my very pleasant duty to thank our keynote speaker, Professor Ganesh Devy, the chair, Professor Gopal Gandhi, Suhas Borker, and the Borker Foundation, along with its family members, for organizing this seminar in difficult times. My thanks to all of you, and also to a wonderful audience whom we can't see, but is spread all over the country and indeed even internationally. I am humbled to have had this opportunity to introduce the 23rd D.S. Borker Memorial Lecture. My thanks to all of you for having made it possible. Thank you very much indeed. And now we'll have the national anthem. May
हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जगति तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे।